The New England Patriots have finally signed a wide receiver. His name, a once rival that dominated New England, Stefon Diggs, has officially signed with your New England Patriots, with my New England Patriots. Stefon Diggs has signed a 3-year, $69 million deal. Shout out to Gronk, his favorite number. Gronk, spike the like button if you're with me. If you love Stefon Diggs to the Patriots, let me know in the comments what you think of Diggs and Drake Maye together on the field on Sundays in 2025. Do you think that Stefon Diggs to the Patriots makes them a possible playoff team? Let me know in the comment section below. I want your raw emotion and thoughts. This is my raw emotion and impression of Stefon Diggs signing to the New England Patriots. And honestly, guys, I don't quite have everything collected because I don't recall the last time the Patriots had a receiver. They haven't had a producer at wide receiver with a track record in years. It's been since Julian Edelman retired. It's been since 2019, Edelman's last good NFL season, that the Patriots had a reliable wide receiver who had a mature game, who could run every route at a high level, crisp inside and outside, could separate and convert a third down. It's really been a long time, and maybe I'm discounting the peaks of Kendrick Bourne or the best of Jacoby Myers. But neither of those players were or are what Stefon Diggs is and was. And you may think that Diggs is no longer the same Stefon Diggs, and I certainly will dive into this in this video. That's where we should start. Stefon Diggs is not Stefon Diggs from 4 years ago. He's not one of the 5 to 6 best receivers in football. At the peak of Stefon Diggs, he was a top 3 or 4 receiver in the NFL. And when you're really talking about Stefon Diggs, you're talking about a really rare player that in his NFL career has had not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 5 seasons of 100+ catches. And last year, he was on pace to have darn near 100 catches. He had 47 catches in 8 games on 64 targets. He was averaging nearly 6 catches a game last year. Around 6 catches a game is 100 catches in a season, if you do the math. He was at 5.9. 62 yards per game would probably be the best season from an average perspective that the Patriots have had from a receiver since Julian Edelman in 2019. And he does bring a receiver that can run the full route tree, that can play inside or out, that can get a drive started with some yak on a screenplay, that can convert with an ability to win on an option route, right? Play in the slot and run the jitterbug Edelman, Wes Welker, Josh McDaniels offensive staples, right? This guy is a great fit for Josh McDaniels, even in the later stages of his career. Because if Diggs is diminished in any way, shape, or form, it's from vertical speed. It's not from horizontal ability. It's not from the ability to separate quickly, release quickly off the line and make a difference. That's where Diggs is still pretty darn good. That's what we saw last year with Houston. He was their quick underneath option. It's why he caught so many passes despite not being the number 1 receiver. Despite being a compliment to Nico Collins, he was still catching a minimum of 4 balls a game. Guys, when you dive into his game log from last year, he was the 21st best receiver in football according to PFF. That's a number 1 receiver in the NFL. And I'm not even projecting for him to be that. but he was graded 21st. Remember, there's 32 number one receivers technically in the NFL. Four catches was the worst he did last year in a game. 4. 6, 4, 10, 5, 6, 6, 5, 5. And it just so happens that against the Patriots, he had 6 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown last year as the number one receiver in the game. Remember, Nico Collins was out. If we're actually going to do that, let's dive into that. Nico Collins was out for a good portion of the beginning of the year. I remember because I had him in fantasy. He had a hamstring pull. So he was out. He only played 12 games last year. I believe he missed 5, right? He missed 5 games last season. And if we're going to pull up the game logs of Nico Collins, Nico missed weeks 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay? So Diggs played without Nico Collins in weeks 6, 7, and 8. And in week 6 and 8, he had 5 catches for 81 yards and 6 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. He did have a weaker game against the Packers in week 7, but he featured as their number one receiver in those 3 games. So we still saw him as a number one receiver last year for at least a brief period. A brief period. Diggs last season, 21st in grade. The year previous, 21st. So the last 2 years, he's still been a top 21 receiver according to PFF. 6 foot, not a big receiver, not a small receiver. Known for his quickness rather than his speed. Even at his peak, he only ran a 4.46 in the 40. He's not exactly a guy that's ever been a burner, but he could definitely get down the field because of his route running and his releases. He played a lot of snaps in the slot last year, 196, but he did play more out wide, 226. So he has the inside-outside versatility. In Buffalo, he was primarily an outside player, right? He was primarily an outside player. Now, so this could still provide the luxury for New England to still utilize Pop Douglas as their primary 3 or their slot player. But Diggs certainly allows them, he's probably going to be their Z. Until, at least entering the draft. The Z being the guy that is the movable chess piece of the offense. Plays inside, plays outside, takes him in motion, more of known as the number 2 receiver. But in New England, that's been the Troy Brown role. That's been the Julian Edelman role, that Z receiver, right? So you look at last season I'm just going to look up yards per route run. I have no idea where he ranks here. Nico Collins was actually 2nd in the NFL. And let's see if I can find Stefon Diggs, 36th in the NFL. And he was right alongside names like DK Metcalf. He was actually higher than DK Metcalf, higher than Jackson Smith and Jigba, higher than Tyreek Hill and Jacoby Myers and Brandon Ayuk. Those are multiple players that actually the Patriots could have traded for. He was below Calvin Ridley just a little, Cortland Sutton, Cooper Kupp, Darnell Mooney, Terry McLaurin. I actually think Diggs, Cooper Kupp was a guy the Patriots could have looked at as well, although he didn't really seem like he wanted to play in New England. I think Diggs is better than Cooper Kupp. I think he's more explosive. I think that he is more consistent. At least, he's not coming off a major injury, but Cooper Kupp to me just lacks explosion at this stage of his career. That's my opinion, personally. I don't know what other people would think, but you guys can let me know in the comments. Okay? Now, the other thing to feature here is the relatively low ADOT for Stefon Diggs. It was at 8.3 last year. That being said, all these criticisms that I'm bringing up, it's not like Puka Nacua was not at the same number. It's not like CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown are not at the same number. I'm looking at this right now, guys. 8.3 ADOT is the same as CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. 3 top 10 receivers in the NFL. So if Stefon Diggs can find his way back from this knee injury, which it does appear like he's looking like he's in pretty good shape. The Patriots met with him. They would not sign him if they didn't feel confident about his status entering next year, right? He might miss some portion of camp, but he looks like he's running routes already. He's working out hard. He's trying to build his explosion in his legs. And it looks like he is going to be on track to play at the beginning of the year. That's at least what it feels like based on some of the workouts I've seen from him. And now you start to think of, okay, they added Matt Collins. He's a big outside wide receiver, good blocker, good personality in the locker room, can be an X receiver in a pinch. You've got Kendrick Bourne, Will he stick around? That's an interesting one. I think he may. He'll be a good complementary receiver. Demario Douglas was their best separator last season. Can we find a role for him? Kayshon Boutte, to me, is more of the field stretcher variety for this offense. It feels like maybe Javon Baker and Jalen Polk are in jeopardy of losing spots, but those are two second-year receivers that could be under development as well. The Patriots would still like to look at receiver in this draft, but it doesn't really feel like the first round should be the area unless they trade back. I don't think the fourth pick is going to be where they address wide receiver because offensive line all of a sudden becomes a much bigger need. And if there is a guy like Abdul Carter sitting there at 4, I think you've got to pick him. So it's rather probably going to be a tackle or Abdul Carter at this point based on this signing. And, when I began to think, because before this video, I did a Russell Wilson reaction. On Bleacher Report. And basically thinking about Russell Wilson signing with the Giants, it didn't make a lot of sense because they signed Jameis Winston. But then you kind of start to think, okay, if Cam Ward's going number 1 to Tennessee, and number 2, okay, what does this mean about number 2 if Russell Wilson signed with the Giants? That kind of does figure that maybe the Browns are picking Shedeur Sanders, because why would the Giants double down at quarterback and then also pick Shedeur Sanders? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Or maybe the Giants like somebody like Jalen Milroe or somebody else like in the second or third round or something like that. I'm just throwing that out there, right? But if the Giants are picking up Russell Wilson to complement Jameis Winston and compete for that spot, right, and maybe Russ gets the early lean, they're thinking that Sanders is very much in play at 2, if I'm not mistaken. Then at 3, that would mean probably Travis Hunter to the Giants, which would then correspond with New England picking up Stefon Diggs, because if they know that Travis Hunter will not be there at 4, as widely discussed as the best receiver in the draft, okay? So if Travis Hunter is gone at 3, because Travis Hunter would fit the need of corner and receiver for the Giants, although receiver is not a huge need for the Giants, but corner is certainly a big need, and he's just a very dynamic player. So it's worth him at number 3, okay? And combining him with Malik Neighbors would be crazy, especially in New York. Okay, so Travis Hunter at number 3. Then you've got Abdul Carter at 4, right? So that's kind of the way that I look at it from a mock draft perspective. So, yeah, I think Diggs can still play. I think he's going to be quicker than fast, shiftier than vertically fast. I think he's going to work a route tree that's between, 1 to 15 yards. I'd expect him to be he's a great fit for McDaniels because everything he does well from a quick and shifty and jitterbug standpoint is what Edelman and Welker did well, right? That's what they did well. That's what Amendola did well. That's what Diggs will do well. I don't think he's going to bring the top of the defense, pop it off like other receivers like DK Metcalf could have, but I think he can work that levels of the field. And also when you talk about the guaranteed money, it's only $24 million. Guaranteed, right? You have to look at the guaranteed. Guaranteed is not a lot. That 26 million guaranteed is not a lot, right? A lot of this money, 69 million is the 3-year, 69 million. It looks interesting. It looks like a lot, but then 26 is guaranteed. So that's interesting to me. Mike Reese, well-respected Patriots reporter, absolutely loves the move himself. Diggs did tear his ACL in Week 8 against the Colts, but he is on track to return in Week 1, according to Adam Schefter. There you go. It's another reason the Patriots felt comfortable with Diggs, according to Elliott Wolf, their GM. Reese thinks that Diggs is a game changer. Coaches raved about him in Houston last season. Some risk coming off the ACL at 31, but decisive move at a major position of need. That's what Reese says. Now, I would agree. Now, the other thing that's going to be heavily discussed in New England about Diggs is his personality. He is a little bit of a diva-ish type of player, but I think New England needs this type of player. I think they need somebody to boot everybody in their butt, because last year, New England was too sensitive, too emotional at wide receiver. They need some leadership. They need some vigor. They need some intensity. They need some competitiveness. They need a dick, in all honesty, on offense. And Diggs is going to provide that. He's going to keep everybody in line with his work ethic. Nobody works harder than Stefon Diggs, right? So that's also something that I think is going to have a trickle-down effect on Drake Maye and the rest of the receiver room. And I don't think this can be a negative for Drake Maye. The only way this would be a negative is if Diggs truly is just dropped off as a talent and he does not see the volume at all because he's just not as good as he used to be. But I think Diggs last year actually took to Houston very well. He went in and he understood he wasn't the number one receiver. That being said, in New England, he will be. So I don't think targets or volume are going to be a problem. And the funny thing about Diggs is, well, Drake Maye was compared to Josh Allen. Diggs played with Josh Allen. So there could be some familiarity there just from like a what they do well standpoint. Like Drake Maye, I think could, he needed a player like this just to complement him and to be able to be reliable. Like a guy that on third down he can go to, a guy to start a drive he can go to. Right? You want to be able to maximize this young quarterback, and it gives them a reliable veteran, even if he's not the same player. Right? And it allows everybody else to fall in place. Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, down the line. It allows everybody to fall in line behind this player, right? Which is also big. So I'm in love with the move. I like Stefon Diggs. I've always liked Stefon Diggs. I do think that, I've been a little critical of him lately just because I feel like he's fallen off a little bit, but I don't think he's arguably still a top 32 player at this position. Like if I were to rank the top 32 receivers in the NFL right now, Diggs would probably be in the conversation from somewhere between 25 and 40. So that's a receiver that will upgrade this room, considering New England did not have a top 60 wide receiver last year. Like there was nobody on their team that was anywhere near the conversation of being in the top 32. So New England gets that now and maybe a possibility for some offensive line help in the draft. New England is looking like a real playoff possibility. I'm really thinking about putting them in the playoffs as a pick, as a prediction. You guys let me know in the comments how you feel about Diggs to New England. It may be dominant. Gronk, spike the like button. Subscribe. Don't be a jabroni. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace.